Right, now we will take now item 10, the notice of motion moved by Councillor Gordon Sampson. He's making a speech, but we can tell you when he's finished.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recent referendum was an opportunity for our country and for Basildon to democratically express their views on whether to remain or leave the European Union. We live in a democratic society, and while some of us may not like the result, they have to accept it. However, what has followed in our communities has been extremely concerning. Reports are of a significant increase in reported hate crime in the week since the result. 331 hate crimes were reported to police-funded True Vision in the week following the referendum, which is an increase of over 268 over the same period before the referendum. The Metropolitan Police reported a 50% rise since the vote, and those are only the ones that have actually been reported. We've seen in the media shocking reports of people being targeted in the street, the Polish Community Centre in Hammersmith that was daubed with offensive graffiti, the notes posted through the door of migrants' homes, plus more worrying physical attacks. I've heard reports also of people being asked when they're leaving now with being voted out of the EU. My own work colleague was ordered whilst walking down the street to go home and pack her bags. All of this behaviour is totally unacceptable and certainly does not reflect the voice of the majority of people in this country or in our borough, whichever way they voted. People should not be forced to live in fear in our society. Sadly, this referendum, for one reason or another, seems to have created some worrying divisions in our society. Using the result as an excuse for racism or xenophobic behaviour is wrong, shameful, and not reflective of the spirit of our country or of Basildon. Many migrants are now living with uncertainty, unsure what will happen next. Will they need to return home, apply for a visa, or simply be allowed to carry on their lives? This uncertainty is impacting on their ability to plan for the future. Again, I have spoken to people who have lived here and been settled here for a number of years, who now fear the unknown and feel like their life has been put on hold. Being a person from a mixed race background, I have sadly experienced racism and xenophobia and hate crime firsthand throughout my life, including since being here in Basildon. I remember walking home from the station on a winter's night a few years ago, and a group of men started shouting racist abuse at me. I was going about my normal routine, and this came totally out of the blue. This impacted on me for some months, and afterwards, as I became more anxious and fearful, taking that simple walk home on a winter's night. How can that be right or acceptable? Many migrants add a significant amount to our country and to our borough, and we should recognise their value to our society. From NHS staff who perform invaluable jobs, professionals who are well embedded into our organisations, to the server at your local coffee shop or restaurant. Imagine them not being there. Our country and our borough will be a poorer place. Many people now call Britain their home, whether they are immigrants or second, third or even fourth generation immigrants. They should not be made to feel like they're no longer welcome. Sadly, we have seen hate crime manifest itself in other ways of late as well. The appalling murder of Labour MP Jo Cox just 3 weeks ago, whilst carrying out a constituency work, was absolutely shocking to many of us. She was killed for what she believed in and fought for. That was hate crime at its worst. It was really positive this week to see the email, Mr. Mayor, from our Chief Executive, informing us that there have been no evident increases in hate crime in our borough. But we do know it exists, both reported and unreported. I also know from emails that we've received from some residents that they're fearful at the moment as a result of what they're seeing happening in other parts of the country. We should work closely together as a council and councillors with our own antisocial behaviour and inclusion and diversity teams and other such organisations like Essex Police, our schools, our community groups, our local support groups, and great organisations such as Hope Not Hate to ensure that residents understand that racism, xenophobia and hate crime are unacceptable in our borough, and to support those who are directly affected or who are feeling vulnerable. As leaders in our community and as responsible members of this society, no matter what our political persuasion, we should condemn all incidents of racist or xenophobic behaviour and all hate crime. We are a free country, a country that is made better by our diversity and our acceptance and tolerance of difference in all its forms. We're inclusive and should continue to be so. No one should be forced to live in fear here. We should value all members of our community. After all, at our core, we're all human beings, with feelings and with emotions, no matter how different we are from each other. That's why, Mr. Mayor and fellow members, I urge you tonight to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Block to second.
Please, gentlemen, please everyone to my maiden speech. First of all, I would like to congratulate Basildon on the referendum vote. Whichever campaign you belong to and whichever way you voted, I cannot help but applaud the referendum for galvanising both the borough and the country to the polls. We've been given a lesson in democracy, which I am proud to have witnessed and proud to have been part of. And no doubt we have some large and exciting changes ahead of all of us. One of those, however, is not an increased tolerance to racism, xenophobia or hate crime. Britain is an island, and a proud one. Our native population is made up of different and diverse cultures and groups. We've always had diversity in this country. Angles, Celts, Saxons, Vikings, Romans, Normans, to name but a few that form the backbone of Britain. Over the years, Britain has subsumed nations, adopted them, integrated them. It's something we have done since the first days of this island, and it is something that we continue to do today. Basildon is no exception. It's a new town. Few of the residents here have a history in this area longer than 60 or 70 years. Most have come to Basildon from somewhere else, and we shouldn't deny others the freedoms that we ourselves use. It's therefore not surprising given the history of this country and this town, this borough and council support social diversity. Let us make no mistake, racism is a crime. There is no place in society and no place in Basildon for those who seek to commit crimes without consequence. I'm not suggesting to this council that we prevent healthy debate on issues such as immigration. I'm specifically calling on us to address the hate that falls within the boundaries of being so against society's morals and values that it is considered a criminal act. Residents of Basildon should not tolerate any rise in crime, and certainly not a rise in crime of this nature. Basildon is a place where all residents are valued. There are those that say that Basildon is divided by the referendum, or has been divided for a long time. Divided in opinion, divided in attitude, and divided in heritage. I would accept those observations of our society. They aren't criticisms though. Basildon is a place where healthy debate is alive and well. You only have to go and knock on the doors to know that. Is not debate created by those differences? Is not the best solution for all created through these conflicts? Is that not a further part of democracy? We in this room are divided. We even sit in those divided factions. And yet we in this room unite at times too. Unite for what we believe is best for this borough. And I would ask you now to unite behind this motion to stamp out unacceptable criminal hate. In the same breath, I would ask Basildon the same thing. Keep on debating the things that matter to you, and keep on shunning those who commit criminal acts. We as a council should stand behind the united Basildon and commit to working against the hate crime, xenophobia and racism that pervades on parts of this area. All elements of the community make up Basildon Borough, and we as a council should work to support all of these elements without prejudice. We should work with and assist all local bodies who fight against hate in the borough. Don't let this referendum, this historic and brave decision by the people of the borough and the country be defined by hate. Let us make the referendum something that is positive for the area and for the country. And that is why I would urge you to support this motion.
The only thing fair is to congratulate both speakers on their maiden speech. So now I call Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I also begin by congratulating Councillors Burton, Sampson and Block on their excellent maiden speeches. I don't think there has ever been a time in this borough's history when newly elected councillors from all parties have been asked to begin their public service at such a divisive, politically rudderless and less than certain time that we're all experiencing now. So it was very brave of them to choose this subject to speak on, and I congratulate them. Mr Mayor, as councillors, we have a responsibility to this town to ensure the safety and protection of all our citizens. Like Councillor Burton Sampson, since the referendum, I have been contacted by people, including business owners in the town, to inform me of a rise in their experience of hate crime. So let us be clear tonight. We as a council have a zero tolerance approach to this. And whilst it is right for us to clearly state that on record, it is equally as important for us as councillors to begin to understand the real reasons behind the increased division in our borough. I wish to say that whilst I disagreed with the result of the referendum, I fully understand why it happened. Now as a council and a local borough, we all have to learn those lessons quickly in order to heal the evident growing divisions we are seeing. Those of us on the Remain side who felt that we didn't recognise the country when we woke up on the 24th of June must spare a thought for the pensioner in Langdon or Pitsea who's been waking up every morning for the last 30 years, watching businesses move and council services cut, wondering where their world has gone to. Similarly, we have to understand the reasons why people are resorting to hatred in those people who are middle-aged and young in our borough. And we have to look at why they took this decision. And it isn't hard to understand why, Mr Mayor, because just last week, councillors were invited to attend a borough profiling meeting that you yourself were at, Mr Mayor, with officers here at the council. By anybody's standards, the results that we heard were shocking. Growing levels of inequality. In my ward of Pitsea North West, we're now in the top 10 most economically deprived areas in the country. Secondary school education and skill set levels, again, some of the worst in the country. Almost a quarter of the children living in this borough are living in child poverty, meaning that proportionally across the towns of Langdon, Basildon and Pitsea, that figure is actually nearer to 50%. 50% of children are living in households with an income lower than $19,000 a year. Families, Mr Mayor, hundreds of them, feeling totally left behind by the situation as they find it. Part of the reason that we are seeing this increase in hate crime. And when you have very little to lose, you have everything to gain by betting against the establishment. As Councillor Block has said, we have to find a way to look to the future and make the most of the opportunities before us. But in doing so, we should ensure that at a basic level, those of us charged with representing people understand the root causes of the hatred and disenfranchisement amongst our residents. We should conduct a review as councillors into ensuring our policy-making processes on this council are reformed so that they work in the interest of all of our borough's people. But equally, when combating hate crime in Basildon, we have to look at ourselves and the messages we put out in the borough. As councillors, we must be honest with the public. We cannot control immigration policies. We cannot determine how much of the Exchequer's budget is spent on international development. We cannot control Brexit negotiations. To suggest we can, to play with people's fears and their expectations in our election literature, to raise these issues in an election where the main issues are supposed to be education, social care, council services and infrastructure is wrong, it's irresponsible and it must stop. Politicians of every political party have failed the families that I mentioned earlier. Our pursuit of votes has come at the expense of a pursuit of a vision that works for the many and not just the few in Basildon. The cause of the motion this evening stems from a demonstrable increase in anger, and we have to look at ourselves as the generation of councillors who find ourselves serving the borough at this moment in history. Are we content with what we find? Are we content to oversee a rise in division in the borough, where black people are being abused in the street? An Indian restaurant that has been part of the Friends community for 40 years has seen its staff abused because they're Asian. Eastern European children being taunted in schools. We've got Liberals blaming the poor, Cameron blaming Boris, the Daily Express blaming the EU, Business blaming Tories, Scotland blaming England, England blaming the rest of London blaming the rest of England, and children blaming their parents and the EU blaming all of us. Can we be surprised that violence, intolerance and anger is the order of the day in Basildon when that is the very situation we politicians have helped to create in order to win seats on this authority? Let us resolve tonight, Mr Mayor, to send a message as one council to shape a positive future where politicians deal less in the currency of fear and more in the currency of hope. Let us commit to a new era of Basildon politics and a new era for our country, and let us and our residents choose hope, not hate.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I also congratulate Councillors Burton, Sampson and Block on their inaugural speeches. Very well done. The great majority of the 17.4 million Brexit voters simply have proper and rational concerns about overall levels of immigration and the effect on social infrastructure and social cohesion. They wanted to take back control of our laws and democracy, build a fairer, safer immigration system, have a friendlier relationship with the EU based on trade, and expand our trading capacity with the rest of the world. I am heartened, therefore, to learn from the Assistant Chief Constable, Mark Hamilton, that at the national level, the vast majority of people are continuing to go about their lives in safety and security, and there have been no major spikes in tensions reported. But there has been an increase in hate crimes nationally, and police forces are working closely with their communities to maintain unity and tolerance and prevent any hate crime or abuse following the EU referendum. But we have to recognise, however reluctantly, that some individuals with utterly vile and reprehensible views will also have voted for Brexit. We in UKIP utterly repudiate and condemn such attitudes. In particular, we recognise the enormous contribution which Polish people have made to our country over the years, from the airmen who fought alongside us in the Second World War, to the Polish workers who contribute to our economy today. We also have to recognise that the referendum has highlighted divisions in social between classes, generations and different parts of the country. 48% of the country voted to stay in the European Union, and many of them are feeling bruised, frightened and rejected. Similarly, I personally have received many emails from Leave voters stating that Remain voters not only objected to the concept of leaving the EU, but have shown complete intolerance towards them personally, labelling them racists. 17.4 million people in our beloved country are not racists, and we all now need to make sure that we stamp out any such rhetoric. I thank Councillor Burton Sampson for bringing this motion before us, which we will be supporting. It is an extremely sad day necessitating such a motion because we, UKIP, believe all forms of hate crime are unacceptable in any circumstances. Hatred not only has the potential to cause serious physical and emotional harm, it damages communities and undermines the diversity and tolerance we should be instead celebrating.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of you'll be supporting the motion, we are a little bit concerned about the term about resources, because this council already puts in significant resources to do what this motion is arguing for. So it's not going to force us to commit any further resources, but we're quite fortunate in Basildon, where we don't experience hate crime like they do in the country. Although one would argue one incident of hate crime is one incident too many. I think on this side of the bench, and I can't speak for everybody, and nor would I, we appreciate those that work in shops, in GPs, hospitals, council workers, and right across the borough. And we do support a diverse and tolerant society, and that's really what it comes down to. And it's interesting listening to the leader of UKIP speak so eloquently and professing platitudes around being, inclusive. When not so long ago, I'll remind you, Mayor, we had a motion on enforcement action that somehow brought in Romanians and the atrocities in Paris. Now that's where politicians play a role. And the role is we don't bring that sort of language into a debate when it's not called for. I'm very happy to stand on this. I would like to have seen the Labour Party acting less like cheat and bringing a motion that was hand-delivered to them by who knows who. It would be nice if they would have had some conceptual thinking and delivered it themselves, because we all got the same motion and any one of us could have brought it. But nevertheless, we will be voting for it. And lastly, Mayor, like the rest of them, congratulations to the two councillors on their maiden speech. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to really rock the apple cart here and tick off the leader. Actually, I was spending some money on this. Councillor Sargent's department in then days organised on the 27th of August the Kingswood Community Day to bring the community together. It's been advertised on the Hope and Hate website, and that's obviously on the third paragraph of this motion. So my group will no doubt be support this motion. And I'd like to follow on from some of the comments made by Councillor Burton Sampson, who's excellent making speech. It took you long enough to get here, but it was worth it when you did. When you spoke about the race hatred you suffered, speaking to previous members of my family and I'm gone, they've suffered that. And I can try to empathise. I could never wear your shoes, but I can empathise. For the first instance, my surname should be Schmidt. And they came over from Victorian times, lived in London, and of course, being a trader in London with Schmidt 100 years ago wasn't good for business. And they reverted the name to Smith. When my grandfather came over from Ireland to this country, very cheap doss houses, that would be the right term, wouldn't it, Mother? The sign would be in the window, no, and forgive me, I'm quoted here, no blacks, no dogs, no Irishmen. And we're in a better situation, and I want to see the law enforced. This issue came up on BBC Essex, and they said, should it just be Nigel Farage condemning these type of attacks? And I said, no, I think all party leaders should condemn these attacks. The law is the law. We've had a lawful democratic referendum, we should respect it. But what I want to add to this, it wasn't just white people who voted today. If you look at the more ethnically diverse boroughs, the gap between Leave and Remain was very close. Birmingham, Leave won. It was only the very trendy and affluent, predominantly white areas of London that heavily voted to remain in Leave. The Bromleys, the Kensington and Chelseas, the Westminsters. Well, I did say trendy, and it is becoming that way. But it was but how people voted, what was in their pocket. Not the colour of their skin. And other towns in England. And I think where politicians of all colours have denied this referendum for so long, when the result came about, there was going to be anger and hope. So we will be supporting this motion because we most certainly want this action day in Kingswood on the 27th of August, where the community will be invited. I'm sure nearby members would be most welcome too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Brown, did you wish to speak? I thought you did just now. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this motion, but I thought as I currently have a German surname, I probably ought to. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillors Burton, Sampson and Block on two very impressive maiden speeches. And I think we can all agree, without hesitation, that we despise racism in all its forms. It is a really pernicious evil in society. as my surname suggests, I am descended from a European immigrant, an East German who decided in 1945 that it would be better to be in England than to be in East Germany. I did vote to leave the European Union. I did so on the basis of sovereignty and sovereignty. Those were my primary concerns. Xenophobia and racial politics are concepts I've rejected my entire life. I am concerned about reports of a rise in hate crimes, but I do think it's important that we take note of the email that was sent out by the Chief Exec. There is no evidence of any specific rise in hate crime here in Basildon. And I also note that the police have said more than once that the surge in reporting does not necessarily equate to surge in attacks. And the Assistant Chief Constable, Mark Hamilton, insisted, although we are seeing reports of hate crime incidents to True Vision, the police online hate crime reporting site, this is similar to trends following other major national or international events. So I do think we just need to sound a note of caution that so far these are only anecdotal reports, and that doesn't detract at all from the personal experience that Councillor Burton Sampson described. But I think we need to accept that racism is unfortunately a feature of our world. It must be combated wherever it's found, but we must be careful not to whip up panic or to scoop together everyday instances of name-calling and petty prejudices and racist idiocy that we can come across every day. And we should not extrapolate that there is some new systemised threat or insinuate that 17.5 million people in this country are all closet racists. And I worry that we may inflame suspicion amongst our communities and stoke up social fear and distrust. And that worries me greatly. I mean, I work in one of the most diverse boroughs in North London. I work alongside people of a befuddling array of faiths and ethnicities and all different types of people all working together. And it worries me to think that we would start whipping up a bit of a panic at this stage. I think it's still early days, but I absolutely have no qualms whatsoever in voting for this motion. I think that racism is something that has to be tackled. It's an ongoing thing. It's existed before the referendum. Unfortunately, I suspect it will continue going forward, and we just must, all of us, be vigilant at all times and make sure that we do stamp down on any signs that this is the result of the referendum or anything else is being exploited to make people who are in this country, who are contributing to our communities, and we must make sure that they're not in any way made to feel unwelcome in this country. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Schrader. Councillor Baggott. This is the last person who indicated to speak, so after Councillor Baggott, I'll call Councillor Burton Sampson to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, the obligatory congratulations to the two ladies speakers. I'm not quite in step with the evidence being said. Most of it, but not all of it. Now, my partner's Kenyan, and my daughter is mixed race, so people would probably have a hard time accusing me of racism. But there is an elephant in the room which does need to be addressed. It's been alluded to and skirted around. Racists, as people said, are idiots. And anybody that thinks there aren't racists in this country would be deluded. There are racists in nearly every country on the planet. But the racism and the Brexit decision are poles apart. And a lot of people that voted for Brexit were feeling, and these are people I've spoken to, especially in Basildon and Kent, a deep feeling of injustice, a deep feeling that their country has been taken away from them by political correctness and by the creep of you can't say this, you can't say that. The idea that other people move in, have their laws imposed over you. And there's a real sense of injustice about that. If I invited somebody to my house and went to get them a drink,
I wouldn't expect to come back in the front room to find they've redone the furniture, redone the house, and actually created their own. I'd ask them to leave. And that is where some of the sentiment has actually come from with ordinary people. Not racist, just a feeling that politicians, that this country isn't actually being fair to them. And I think we have to address that as well. Because if we just carte blanche say anybody that raises the issue of immigration or raises the issue of they're concerned is a racist, we're actually totally missing the point. Councillor Callaghan said, quite rightfully, we need to listen to people. We do. But we also need to make sure we're listening to the right message. Any form of racism is abhorrent. Any form of race crime, anything, no matter whether it's black, white, green, red, yellow, alien, is abhorrent. And anybody who does it, to be frank, is an idiot. But let's also respect the views of ordinary people, especially working people, that just want to see their country and their laws being the country that they want. And I think we just need to make that point, which hasn't been made, I think, effectively this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Burton Sampson, your 5 minutes to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully I won't take 5 minutes. Firstly, thank you to everybody for your comments and your kind comments to both myself and Councillor Block on our maiden speeches. It was quite nerve-wracking. I would firstly just, in terms of Councillor Callaghan, I absolutely agree we need to look at healing the divisions that are currently, we can't deny it, are in existence in our society. And I think you're right, understanding the real reasons behind those divisions are key. Councillor Orport Hodge, I'm glad to hear that you and your party will be supporting our motion this evening. And you did mention social cohesion. I have to say, though, it is a shame that the National UKIP Party decided to use their wonderful breaking point poster during the campaign, the referendum campaign, which certainly to me wasn't social cohesion. However, thank you for your support. And to both Councillor Hodge, Orport Hodge and Councillor Baggott, I agree, not everybody who voted to leave was racist. Far from it. But I can pretty much guarantee that every racist voted to leave. To Councillor Turner, I'm really pleased to hear that resources are being used to address hate crime in our communities. I just urge that we do review that in the present time to make sure they're being used in the right way to address new fears that unfortunately some residents currently have. I understand there's not an unlimited pot of money, but what we're currently using, it's important to make sure that that's being used to really address the current issues that are happening at this moment in our society. And Councillor Smith, thank you very much for your comments and for your family history. I do have to say, though, it's a shame that your campaign was to take us back in time by leaving the EU and taking us back to how our country used to be. But thank you very much.
But we'll be that way soon. Free VU, no more Herman Van Rompuy. No bananas.
Councillor Smith, let Councillor Burton Sampson wind up, please.
Finally, to Councillor Schrader again, thank you very much for your comments. I don't think this is whipping up panic. I think what we're trying to do is address a genuine concern that a number of immigrants, migrants have in our society, both in Basildon and in the country at the moment. I hope that this issue doesn't grow and that we can quash it as a borough and as a country. But I do believe that we do have to address this issue. And that we do have to show support to people who are genuinely contributing to our society. So, Mr. Mayor, that's me done, and I would love to now move to the vote.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton Sampson. Right, we now put this to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We will now break to 1:15 in 3 minutes, and when we come back, we will be including the press and the public because of the 1 or 2 items.